just like today, actually, America lost its innocence. I'll never forget where I was as I learned about the two airplanes going into the World Trade Center in New York. I was actually on my way to Capitol Hill, about to meet with the office of Chairman Elliot Engel. And that is when our worldview was altered, and many, many people have sacrificed a tremendous amount. For many people, 20 years seems like the end of an era. But for those of us who have lost loved ones, it is really a horrific anniversary, and it could be, as one person who lost her brother told me, it could be 1 year, it could be 5 years, it could be 20 years. The pain is always as poignant. We are profoundly honored today to have Representative Brian Mast of Florida, of the 18th District of Florida. Prior to his election to Congress, Representative Mast followed in his father's footsteps by serving in the U.S. Army for more than 12 years, earning medals including the Bronze Star Medal, the Army Commendation Medal for Valor, the Purple Heart Medal, and the Defense Meritorious Bronze Medal. While deployed in Afghanistan, he worked as a bomb disposal expert under the elite Joint Special Operations Command. The last improvised explosive device that he found resulted in a rather catastrophic injury, which included the loss of both of his legs. Brian remained on active duty following the injuries and provided expertise to the National Nuclear Security Administration and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms during his recovery process. After his retirement from the U.S. Army, Brian continued working in counter-terrorism and national defense as an explosives specialist with the Department of Homeland Security. Representative Mast subsequently received a degree from Harvard University and volunteered to serve alongside the Israeli Defense Forces to show support for the freedom Israel represents throughout the Middle East and the world. So it's my profound honor to hand the podium over to Representative Brian Mast, who will talk about the special significance of September 11th to him and why he feels or does not feel that the precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan does a disservice to many who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Representative Mast?
No, Sarah, I appreciate the invitation to speak with you all today. I know that I'm speaking with a group that recognizes there are atrocities in this world that should never be forgotten, as we say on 9/11, and every day we will never forget, and should happen never again. And 9/11, the events, the terrorist acts of that day, and those that preceded it and those followed it, are events that should never be forgotten. And saying never forget doesn't do justice to what really is the responsibility of Americans and those outside of America around the world that were affected by that fateful morning. It goes beyond that to say, who is it that we must never forget that attacked us? What were the ways that we must never forget that they attacked us? What is their commitment to attack our way of life? What is it about our way of life that they wish to attack and hate so virulently? These are all things that we have to go on this day of remembrance, or on the heels of this day of remembrance, and really reflect on those things, because they carry such a great importance. And when we analyze and break down some of those things, I think we're reminded of how we must never let our guard down. The enemies that attacked us, that resulted in me going off to Afghanistan, along with by the end of it, millions of my brothers and sisters in arms to go and fight in Afghanistan and other places. It happened because Afghanistan became a launching point and a training ground for terrorism. It was said recently by President Biden that his #1 objective was to make sure that Afghanistan would never again be allowed to be a launching point for terrorism. And this is something that I'll touch off upon, but I have to analyze this and say, there's never been a greater time in history that we have to worry about Afghanistan as a launching point for terrorism. Not just as a launching point for terrorism, such as the events that we saw on 9/11, but a launching point by a terrorist organization that will now be a recognized government that is no different than Al-Qaeda, no different than ISIS or ISIS-K. They simply wear a slightly different name, fall under a slightly different banner, but believe in the same strict Sharia governing bodies that would imprison men for not having beards, that would stone women for being in the workforce, that would see the parents of young girls be killed simply for the crime of being educated, that would see young boys be sold into slavery or be sold into becoming soldiers beyond their will. That is the kind of government that we are now talking about. Recognizing to say, you will now be the official governing body of Afghanistan. You will have an invitation to the United Nations and to Davos and to other places to play a role on the global stage. And what that tells me is that we have forgotten. We have forgotten exactly who it is that we're dealing with and what their commitments are. And now that they are, according to the president, have the most advanced military weaponry that was paid for and left to them by the United States of America. This didn't have to happen. And this didn't have to happen in the aim of creating a celebration and an optical focus by using the events of 9/11 as a symbolic time of when we would be withdrawing from Afghanistan, which is exactly what I believe was done here. The events of 9/11 were taken away from a time for us to say and remind ourselves that we will never forget, and attempted to be used as an optical focus point for the administration to celebrate and say, we have now gotten everybody out by this 20th anniversary of Afghanistan. And as a result of focusing on optics, instead of focusing on strategic objectives that make the United States of America safer and Americans safer and the globe safer and those across the Middle East safer, we have instead reversed that course and put everybody in a substantially greater danger. It's often said, as I said already, the most advanced military weaponry that was left to them. It's not just the most advanced military weaponry that I worry about creating the next 9/11 that will result as a result of forgetting the first 9/11. The weaponry that was left to them is the weaponry that can be used to shoot down military aircraft, the weaponry that can likewise be used to shoot down civilian aircraft, and the weaponry that can be used to go and conduct attacks like what happened at the Khobar Towers or the USS Cole bombing or so many other attacks that we've seen from terrorist organizations like this. And all of this happened because of trying to make an optics point on 9/11 instead of reaching strategic objectives. And that has put the world in greater danger. It's often said that we need to seek peace through strength. And there is peace when you show strength. But when you have a Pennsylvania Avenue that has allowed itself to not act as Americans act, which is to never be intimidated. On 9/11, we were not intimidated to say we will retreat from the world. We were energized to say, you terrorists will go no further. This is the point beyond which you will not go. We will hunt you. We will find you. We will destroy you. We will not let you sleep. You will not have another day's rest. You will have no peace because of the strength that we will show. That is the course that the United States of America has now reversed, along with defending our greatest and most sacred ideals, such as freedom, and defending those who will fight for freedom. That is what has been lost in this. That is what has been surrendered. That's what's been given up with this white flag of surrender that they have walked out of the White House with and presented to the Taliban, to be intimidated by them, to say, Yes, Taliban. We will leave our most secure airbase and back off to this one because that is what you've said. We will leave our embassy because that is what you've intimidated us into doing. We will leave on the time frame that you, the terrorists, are telling us instead of what we decide is best for America and the globe, because that is what you have said. And because we have no strength, we will have no peace. That is the result of this, of both the feeble actions and the inactions alike that have taken place in this Afghanistan withdrawal. And it has all been precipitated, in my opinion, as a result of forgetting what we vowed to never forget. And this is something that is difficult for service members to handle, to think about the sacrifices and those that we lost and those that we love and everything that they sacrificed for, to see that flushed away in the name of optics instead of strategy and tactics and reaching real and measurable goals that make the world a better place. That's one of the most difficult things for us to go out there and reflect upon when we reflect on them next to the sacrifices that we saw made. America can still overcome this. We can. We are the most resilient, greatest nation, in my opinion, ever in the history of the face of this earth. And that resilience and that grit and that determination, it stems from a word that I already used, in my opinion, and that is freedom, the free will of man and their desire to go out there and defend that free will, recognizing that we come from a government that does not derive its power simply as a government. It derives its power from the consent of the governed, and its job is to defend the freedoms that were given by a higher power, that were given by God, not give freedoms to people that the government creates. That kind of system creates a will and a desire in men and women that it is something worth fighting for. And no matter how weak and feeble those that sit in Pennsylvania Avenue are, we know that where the power truly comes from, the people in every small town and city across America, that they still have that power inside of them because they still believe in those ideals. They still believe that those things are worth fighting for, no matter what somebody in a suit and in the White House will go out there and preach to the world in some other manner. We hold the power because our government will always be one that is by the consent of the people. And it's always, as long as we hold to those ideals, then our power can't be stripped away, no matter the weakness that we see out of any place across this country, to include, as I said, this administration in Pennsylvania Avenue. So it's in that I find hope. It's in the Americans and the exfil organizations that I see still going out there, risking their lives to get Americans and others out of Afghanistan, though they have no support from the US government. It's those people that I see going out there and fighting that show me that there's still light in this darkness. There are still those that are willing to go out there and risk and fight. And those are the ones that give me the hope. It's those that are out there supporting them, saying that we're going to make sure that you have the resources to get our people out, because we don't leave our men behind, because of that sacred oath that we make from one service member to another. And it's in that we still see the strength and the resilience of Americans across this place. And that's where I still find pride, and I still find an ability to smile in the midst of everything that I've seen in this. I've said it before, that those that served in Vietnam, in the jungles and the rice paddies, they didn't lose Vietnam. They gave everything that they had to go out there and fight for a nation that they loved. It was Pennsylvania Avenue that lost Vietnam. And those that served in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and throughout the war on terror in so many different places, they didn't lose Afghanistan. Those that were trudging over the mountains with everything that they could carry on their back, they didn't lose Afghanistan. Pennsylvania Avenue lost Afghanistan. But we will not allow America to be lost by the same weak and feeble administration that is giving up our strong points to the world. That much I believe out of the American people.
Oops. Oh. Okay, okay. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I just wanted to ask you a few questions before we open this up to the audience. First of all, I tremendously appreciate your confidence in the American people and your message of optimism and of hope. But I'm very, very worried about what this administration is signaling to all of our enemies. Our enemies do not seem to fear us right now, and many of our friends and allies don't feel that they can any longer trust us. And we see how Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas sent a telegram to the Taliban of congratulations, and Ibrahim Raisi of Iran congratulated them. We see how Russia and sees fertile ground, and China, who is, extremely greedy, sees things that they could plunder in Afghanistan. And we're only 6 months into this administration. Do you think, if, God willing, there will be a turnaround in the next administration, that this damage could be repaired?
The damage can be repaired. America can resume its place as the leader on the global stage. It should not be China, and I think many across the globe recognize that. But there's many that don't have the ability to combat China. It should not be Russia. It should not be Iran. But we see them working to make sure that the United States of America can never again return to the region. China occupying our airbase, Russia and Iran making sure that we can find no launching point to secure the region from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, or any other place in the region, because they do not want us there, because they recognize the strength that our presence brings against their evil and their tyranny. We have given up that high ground, and it's not going to be easy to take that high ground back, to have those capabilities back that were given up. But given the right leadership in America, the kind of America first leadership that we had for the previous 4 years, that was putting China on their heels, that ended the life of terrorists like Soleimani, or that had been killing Americans for so many years, that had been leading the terrorist nation of Iran, and to think that it will be easy to undo what's going on. It won't, because here's the opposite direction that's taking place right now. We have an administration that is looking to re-enter the Iran deal, that is apologizing, and we're never supportive of us killing that Iranian terrorists. We see them wanting to make a second nation, rather a nation, as they call a two-state solution, a nation out of a governing body of Hamas. It's no secret by people on either side of the aisle. I've heard it from Secretary Blinken and from former Secretary Kerry and others in open hearings. If there was actually real elections in Gaza or in the West Bank, that Hamas would absolutely win those elections. It's why Abbas is not having those elections. So when somebody's talking about making a second state there, they are talking about creating a state that would be giving now Hamas a seat at the UN, another terrorist nation, a second Iran in the Middle East that is now part of the United Nations. And we see what's happening with Afghanistan. They are creating terrorist-run nations, a nation now run by the Taliban, possibly Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Time will tell what happens on those fronts. But those are the challenges that they are now creating around the globe through their weak and feeble policies.
Thank you. We couldn't agree more. And that's why we are so blessed to have you in the U.S. Congress, Congressman. So I'm now going to turn the podium over to my wonderful colleague, Hussein Abubakar Mansour, who will be reading the questions that are coming in. Hussein?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. I want to start by thanking the Congressman for everything that he did, does, and will do for our country. Personally, Congressman, I arrived to this country in 2012 seeking political asylum. And I know for a fact that the safety and the opportunity that was offered to me by the United States would have not happened without the sacrifice that you gave to this country and the many other sacrifices that many others gave. So personally, and I'm sure on behalf of all our listeners, thank you for your service, past, present, and future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We received multiple of questions from our audiences, and we're going to still receive questions. So to all our listeners, if you have any questions, go ahead. You can type them in the chat or down in the Q&A section, and we will get down to them. One of the first questions that we received is, how, in your opinion, will the decisions of this administration affect the morale of our troops?
There are service members across the board that have reached out to me, reached out to many of my colleagues in Congress saying, this is somebody that I worked with. Can you help them get out? This is somebody in their family that they are moving from field to grape orchard to pomegranate orchard to this safe house to this safe house. Can you help them get into Pakistan? Can you help them get into somewhere else? Can we help give them a visa? Now, what this has to do with the morale of service members is this: our most sacred oath to one another, as I've said, is that we don't leave our men behind. Those that worked alongside of us were left behind. Their families were left to be killed, tortured, murdered. That is not hyperbole whatsoever. The way that this is weighing on our service members is something that I have not seen in any other way other than akin to the weight that has brought many service members to suicide. And I say that seriously. It is weighing on service members in a way that I've never seen. The fact that they believe people that they made commitments to, that those commitments were broken and that these individuals were left behind. So the effect that that has on the morale of service members, as well as to think that their life's work was flushed away in this way, that to have to question whether the injuries that they sustained or the sacrifices that they saw from their friends or the lives that they saw lost, to have to question or have people question for maybe the first time ever in 20 years, was it worth it? Absolutely, that weighs heavily on the morale of every single service member.
Thank you, Congressman. Another question that we actually received multiple questions with the same content. Do you believe that the Biden administration is leaning or heading towards recognizing the Taliban as a legitimate Afghan government? Let's The Biden administration, Secretary of State Blinken, are 100% leaning towards recognizing the Taliban. Let's look at number one of the accusations that came out recently, still not totally substantiated, but we'll call it a serious accusation at this point, that President Biden spoke to President Ghani about manipulating the intelligence about what was going on with the Taliban, which should absolutely be investigated as a treasonous act. Why would he want to manipulate the intelligence of what is going on with that terrorist organization? Go beyond that and recognize that they are negotiating with them. They were sharing intelligence with them, sharing the names of Americans and others with them, working with a terrorist organization, people that we were killing just a couple of weeks ago in that way, succumbing to their demands about leaving Bagram Air Base, leaving our embassy, leaving the country on their time frame when they say so. That is by all standards a recognition that you are in charge, whether you get to sit in the presidential palace or not. If our nation is doing what you demand, then we are thereby saying you are in charge. That is what is said in that by default. Go beyond that to one other point here. Our government, this administration, the Biden administration, is not working, not having any communication whatsoever with those that are still fighting the Taliban. They see any communication or support of those individuals as a hindrance to the relationship that they are trying to build with the Taliban, very quite literally turning their back on those that are fighting for freedom. And in case, just following up on this question, in case the administration actually does that, what does the U.S. Congress can do in order to deal with that or prevent that from happening?
Under this Congress, under Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, Democrats have the majority. There will be nothing done about this. That's a fact. Congress, as a bicameral body, is run entirely by the majority. The majority will not have hearings to speak about whether their negotiations with the Taliban are just or unjust, to hold Biden to account. This will not take place. We have a hearing coming up on Monday with Secretary of State Blinken in the Foreign Affairs Committee, one of the committees that I sit on. He's not even taking the time to attend this in person. And I suspect as you watch this, you will see a robust defense of Secretary Blinken and their desire to continue a victory lap for what has happened in Afghanistan, instead of acknowledging their failures, everything that could have been avoided, the lives that shouldn't have been lost there, the strategic blunders that have taken place. They will do their best to take a victory lap for essentially sinking a ship and wanting to take credit for sending out lifeboats to try and save people. That will be the tact that they continue.
We received a question actually from Stuart Force, whom we're honored to have with us. He's the father of the late American hero, Taylor Force. He's asking, what is the most effective way for us to educate those people that have no knowledge of the situation that we're facing?
To educate them with facts, to let them know, to use the president's own words, and make the point of where they are directly lying to us and where we should hold them to the standards that they are putting out there. I've said this a number of times. When the administration steps up to the microphone, it does not take a lot of common sense to see the ways that they are lying to us. And it should be very transparent to everybody. When Secretary of State Blinken sets up in front of a camera to address the American people and says to the American people, the Taliban have promised to not allow terrorists safe haven or to enter this country. Every American should scratch their head and say, so the terrorists have promised not to allow terrorists in the country and to not allow the nation that they're running as terrorists to be a safe haven for terrorists. That is the flat out kind of lies that they're stepping in front of cameras and expecting American people to believe. And we need to hold them account to the objectives and standards that they say they're trying to reach. When President Biden says his number one objective is that Afghanistan never again be allowed as a launching point for terrorism, he has made Afghanistan the most likely launching point for terrorism anywhere across the globe. When he says that his job as president is to defend and protect the United States of America, then you have to ask and say, where has he defended and protected the United States of America? Not in the Middle East, certainly not when we look at the loss of life that could have been totally avoided, not on our own domestic borders, not on our southern border, not in terms of our jobs, our energy production, our freedom. Where has he protected and defended the United States of America? And the common sense answer is he hasn't. And I think, in my opinion, the truth is so vivid and so clear here. We know that people will always resist it, but we have to do our best to get it out there in front of people and not allow it to be turned.
Thank you. Actually, I'll follow up on your response by trying to group a few questions that we received. You seem to have a vision that the Taliban, Iran, Hamas, that all of them are different groups of the same Islamist threats that the United States and the world has been facing. But also it seems that there are political leaders and political establishments who are trying to actually differentiate or kind of split hair between what Iran is, what Hamas is, what the Taliban is, as you just said right now, that they can be different and promise all of this. Why do you think that some areas in our political establishments are trying to do this hair splitting?
I think what they see in splitting those hairs is, one, just trying to justify the situations that they have created. The United States of America is unlike any other country across the globe. we have the ability as a nation to create situations for entire continents, entire regions, not just for Americans. That is our ability as what has been the global leader for the last century. That is what we can do. And that ability has now been used to allow an evil to precipitate in so many places. And that attempt to split hairs is an attempt to cover their failures. Their failures because of ignorance, arrogance, and incompetence. That is why they are trying to split these hairs. There's an old saying in politics, I'm not going to use the real words, but don't BS a BSer, right? You know when somebody's trying to BS you. And that's exactly what's going on here. They're trying to split these hairs so that they can cover their failures, their incompetence, their arrogance, their ignorance on all of these fronts. I would say one other thing beyond this that's important to recognize. Whenever I wonder why somebody is pursuing a certain policy, whether in Congress or somebody else, one of the questions that I always try to ask myself, if I can't figure it out, is to say, where's the money? Where can I follow dollars to? And that's something that I can't sit here and say I have this fully fleshed out yet, but I will absolutely be looking to follow the dollars of what is going on with these alliances. We can certainly follow the dollars for China and Russia and understand why they want us out of Afghanistan and what they're going to do with the region. But that's something that we need to look at as the United States of America and say, let us follow the dollars and see if we can't figure out a reason why it is that this administration has undertaken the feeble actions that they've undertaken.
Thank you. We received a lot of questions, actually, and pretty much all of them are asking about the same thing, which is basically the Trump administration. So we received a question about the Trump administration's agreement with the Taliban for withdrawal, and then also the withdrawal from northern Syria, which caused many problems to our Kurdish allies. And here the question is, and I believe actually left-leaning media outlets pose it the same way, that basically that the Biden administration's move towards withdrawal from certain security commitments that we have is just a continuation of a momentum that already started even in the Republican establishment to withdraw from these commitments. What do you say about this?
There was, largely unanimous consent that we don't want to be forever in Afghanistan in a military wartime capacity. Republicans, Democrats, independents, people in and out of office feel that way. I feel that way as well. I don't want our people there in perpetuity either. How and why you do something absolutely matters. For this administration to go out there, the Biden administration to go out there and say, we had to do something because President Trump did this, that's not the truth. They picked the time, manner, and place in which they chose to withdraw from Afghanistan. They chose to take a situation where Americans had not been killed in the last year. We were down to 2,500 US service members there, still had Bagram, still had our embassy. We're not trying to withdraw out of an unsecured airbase to a situation that they had to bring back in close to 8,000 to 9,000 troops. Americans were killed and the situation became total chaos. That's what happened with the actions that they undertook by being intimidated by the Taliban. I would challenge anybody, Republican, Democrat, independent, otherwise, to show me 1 ounce of how President Trump was intimidated by the Taliban, by Iran, by Hamas, by any other terrorist entity. He wasn't. There was peace because there was strength, because those enemies knew that they would get absolutely destroyed. There would be nothing left of them but a pile of ashes, like what was left of Soleimani. That's exactly what they understood. They recognized the weakness of Joe Biden. And because of that, they intimidated him out on their timeline, intimidated him out of our embassy, intimidated him out of our airbase, intimidated him into doing every single thing that they demanded. Find me a person that say that would have happened under President Trump, no matter how left and liberal they might be, that would be the case.
Thank you. We received multiple questions specifically about the equipment which the United States left behind in Afghanistan. The questions basically go, why didn't our military take our equipment before leaving? Can we destroy it or disable? Why didn't they blow it up pretty much before they left? Was this a political failure? Was this a military failure? And why is the administration so confusing in its messaging about what to be done with this equipment?
Sheer incompetence and sheer idiocracy. So again, let's use the words of President Biden. He said, as just on the heels of Afghanistan falling to the Taliban, that we left them the, quote, most advanced military weaponry, the most well-armed. They have the most advanced military weaponry. And then in the days that followed that, he went out there and said what? Well, what happened with Afghanistan was going to happen in a day, a week, a month, a year. We knew that this was going to happen no matter what. If you knew that this was going to happen no matter what, then you have to be an absolute idiot to leave them a round of ammunition, an RPG, an anti-tank weapon, a rifle, a machine gun, an armor weapon, an anti-aircraft weapon, a helicopter, or anything else. They are, again, absolutely lying to the American people by saying one thing in one breath and the exact opposite in another breath. And that is the situation that has been going on throughout all of this. If they step up in front of the camera or in front of the microphone, you can rest assured that they are telling a lie, especially if the sentence begins with President Biden saying, "Let me be clear." You can be sure that there is a lie immediately about to follow.
Thank you. Now, given how the Biden administration caused the United States to significantly underperform in front of a group such as the Taliban, should we worried about what the Biden administration can achieve in front of Iran? And we should be worried about Iran kind of being able to outmaneuver the United States into obtaining nuclear weapons? It
should be of great concern. Let's not talk about nuclear weapons in this respect, but it's simply in strategy and tactics. In these ways, we have a blindfold over our face in the region. We have no ability to run ISR throughout the region. Many of those countries are not going to let us fly aircraft over their countries in order to have time on target to view what's going on with our ISR platforms. There's nobody throughout the Middle East right now in any of those nations that's lining up to say, let me be a human intelligence asset for the CIA, the State Department, for the United States of America, because I see how well they're taking care of those people that helped them in Afghanistan. Every single one of them that was working with the United States in any other nation right now is absolutely wondering if they want to continue that relationship because of what's happened with those that were supporting the United States of America in Afghanistan. Those are just two tactical blunders that relate to what they keep calling our over the horizon capabilities for intelligence and other things that are non-existent. We are blacked out in that region, and it is directly because of giving up the Bagram Air Base, which could have been secured with very limited military personnel, and giving up those that helped us in the region in the way that we left them behind and gave them up. We gave up the ability to claim the moral high ground in the way that we would support those that help us, and all those that were helping us recognize that. That has given tremendous strength to Iran, to China, to Russia, to a number of others to say, hey, come work with us. Don't work with them. You see how they will treat you.
Yes. And speaking of our allies, we received also several comments requesting comment on the expected wave of Afghan refugees in the United States. Are there any security vetting processes that are established in order to ensure that there is no infiltration of those waves by ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists?
There were security processes in place by the administration pulling out in the manner in which they did, in which these were questions we were asking on the Foreign Affairs Committee months ago. How many people do you have working on these special immigrant visas? How many do you account for when you talk about they have on average 3 to 5 children and a spouse? So you're talking about, let's say, 5 individuals. How many people do you need to vet those individuals? No answers were given. We don't know. We don't know. Those were the answers that were given by the administration. If done under the appropriate procedures, you would have a number of our intelligence agencies vetting these people before they're coming out of country, checking to see what their work was, what their history was, whether they're going to be granted a visa or not. And this isn't just special immigrant visas for those that worked with us. That's the same as visas for other people that are seeking to get out of Afghanistan for a number of reasons. Because of the way the administration has left, those very robust capabilities to vet individuals coming into our country were absolutely minimized. That's not a secret. They're taking people out of Afghanistan. Other countries are pressuring America to say, no, you're not going to leave these people here. You took them out. This might be a holding pattern, but you need to take them back to your country because you were the ones that took them out. Those are the pressures that are coming to play in this, without having the ability or without having vetted them, many of them, in the appropriate ways that would have been a much longer period of time. That's one of the big problems with the way that they pulled out of Afghanistan, instead of giving themselves the appropriate time to do so. In that, I would just say, do the simple math on it. If you have a group that has been known to be inspired by terrorists, and 1% of them become radicalized and jihadists, well, if there was 100 people let in, then we're talking about 1, right? If there was 1,000 people coming in, then we're talking about this. If there's 100,000 that they let in, then we're talking about this. And I would say do the math on it, and you will see the risk of it.
We hope and pray that such risks will never materialize in the United States. We received a number of questions about NATO, actually, and if there is any way in which we can expect NATO with the European allies, the UK or Germany, to step up their efforts to try to fill the void of many of the American commitments and responsibilities that currently, security commitments, that currently is uncertain given the current administration.
This was a place that when the new administration came in, they did their best to genuflect and apologize to European nations about the way the Trump administration was demanding that they uphold their NATO commitments, their dollar commitments, their military service commitments, their time on target commitments, asking that they uphold those commitments. This administration came in and apologized for President Trump being strong on that, calling out allies for not living up to these commitments for however many years. And so the likelihood that you see this administration pushing back in the opposite way, in my opinion, I see it very unlikely.
Thank you. A different question that we received is that American voters seem to be generally unable to prioritize foreign policy issues and prefer to focus on domestic issues and, unfortunately, now symbolic and ideological issues as well. How can this be changed, and how can this be rebalanced?
Oftentimes it takes a conversation with an individual. I spoke with somebody who called my office just recently. I just answered the phone. They wanted to talk. They were upset that I kept talking about what was going on in Afghanistan. Quite literally said to me, why do I care what's going on there? Beyond, understanding that they're Americans there. Why do I care about what happens there? And I said, well, one of the simple reasons that you should care is that the president left them the most advanced military weaponry. So if they now have hundreds of surface to air, shoulder fired, man portable weapons that were created to take down a military aircraft, what happens when one of those takes down the aircraft that you're flying in, whether it be in Europe or Asia or South America or mainland United States? What happens on that front? That's just one very tiny example of why that matters. You could take this to a lifestyle question and say, listen, you want to live a certain American lifestyle that you and your family have become accustomed to, whether it be your ability to travel, the education that you receive, your ability to live a lifestyle no matter how you want, free to live as, whatever gender you want to call, marry, a person of whatever gender that you want to marry, some of those things that fall more under social issues, your freedom to do those things. Well, guess what? Under the Shia rule of these groups, that does not exist. You can't travel to that place. And if those ideologies spread, then it certainly won't exist here. That's another example of just the difference between spreading the American values of freedom for all people versus, their tyrannical rule of Shia or of Sharia. And this is just a couple of examples of what it is that we look at on those fronts.
Thank you. We received multiple questions actually specifically about, of course, China, which is an increasingly important issue for United States security interests and strategic interests in general. The Biden administration uses China as a primary justification of shifting strategies and tactics and resources elsewhere, that basically we need to focus more on a confrontation with China. But didn't the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of our air bases actually play to the hands of the CCP, and isn't the current strategy or lack of strategy serves China more than actually helps the United States confront rising Chinese influence?
I would, just very simply answer everything that you just questioned in the affirmative. Yes to everything. Afghanistan bordered China. We now no longer have the abilities to have human or geospatial ISR intelligence in the region because of the way that they are blocking us out now of Afghanistan, but of every other nation in the region as well. Our credibility, they're filling the void there. The list goes on, and let's make a prediction for the future. Again, we've talked about the likelihood of terrorist attack at home and abroad. When you talk about what would be strategic out of a China or somebody else, they now can take U.S. weaponry that was left in the hands of these terrorists, sell it to other terrorist groups because they can get their hand on it, get their hands off of that as an attack that was disrupt the globe, and say, because you could see this playing out in this way, whatever jihadist holding up their phone, doing a YouTube video of one of these surface to air assets, knocking down an airliner is somewhere in the European Union, and the United States of America getting blamed for leaving all of those weapons with a group of terrorists. You could see something like that taking place as the United States of America is trying to negotiate something important that China doesn't want to see happen, or Iran doesn't want to see happen, or Russia doesn't want to see happen. Those are very real risks when you talk about what can happen on that stage.
And how all of this will impact the U.S.-Israel relationship, whether the policy towards Iran, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, or the shifting strategies in the Middle East in general?
It's not a secret that this administration wants to do everything the opposite of the previous administration. The previous administration, in my opinion, was the most friendly and joining in terms of cross-training and intelligence and other forms of allied relationship crossover that you could see, the strongest of any president out there. They want to be the opposite of that. They want to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. They want to recognize a Palestinian state that, as I said already, would become a terrorist-run nation. You would create a country just to see a terrorist-run country being created, the second Iran. The weakness in terms of the void that's being left throughout the Middle East that will strengthen adversaries that we don't want to be stronger in the Middle East, Russia, Iran, China. Yes, this absolutely hurts the relationship with Israel. That's not a question.
Thank you. Recently, every patriotic American was shocked to see figures in the United States Congress, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, holding anti-Semitic and anti-American views from Capitol Hill. Should we expect more of this or less of this in the future?
In my opinion, and I'll make this the last question as well, the anti-Semitism that you see in Washington is not on the decline. It is on the rise. And when you look at the way that Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Priscilla Presley, others, the way that they demonize Israel for defending herself. When you look at the fact that there is a foreign affairs chairman that during the recent attacks in Israel would hold no hearings, move no legislation to hold Palestinians accountable for the attacks and the terrorism that was taking place, was actually considering not signing off, because the foreign affairs chairman has to sign off on foreign military sales, not signing off on previously negotiated sales to Israel because Israel was out there defending herself. Literally, that's the equivalent of sanctioning Israel. Israel was being attacked. The current Democrat foreign affairs chairman, Gregory Meeks, was essentially looking to sanction Israel over defending herself by not signing off on those foreign military sales. To think that the anti-Semitism that exists is on the decline would be a naive thing to think.
Thank you.
All right, Congressman, I think everybody in our listening audience, viewing audience, feels this profound sense of gratitude to you for your courage, your intellectual honesty, your moral clarity, and your ability to put your values on the line and to go out there into the field of combat. And you have sacrificed a tremendous amount. And for that, we will always, always be grateful. And we at EMET have a kind of Reaganist view of the world, and we believe in peace through strength, not through appeasement. And as Ronald Reagan said, the loss of freedom is no more than one generation away. And we are incredibly grateful to you and other members of the U.S. military who so valiantly served. And I hope that this has not been too demoralizing an epic for them. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I cannot begin to express my profound gratitude to you. And thank you to all of our viewers that have signed in today.
Wish you all the best.
All the best.